Again, the newest DNA scientific studies showing that the people known as the Jews of Israel, and indeed Jews all over the world, are in fact of Khazar, not Israelite origins, is backed by the earlier work of historians. These historians found that their scholarly books and reports were immediately attacked by Zionists desperate to maintain the fiction that the Jews could trace their heritage all the way back to Abraham. The Zionists knew the truth, that they are not a race but a composite of many races, or amalgamation. They had to keep up the myth that they were a homogeneous race kept together by religion and community interest for 5,000 years. Only in this way could the Zionist Jews claim to be the seed of Abraham, or the descendants of Abraham. Only as Israelites could the Jews claim possession to a land where they and their ancestors had never been. The Zionists knew too that the genocide and ethnic cleansing against the Palestinians was not justified unless they, the Jews, had claim to the land. How else could they get the millions of evangelical Christians to support their horrible behaviour? If they were suspected of being converts to Judaism and not actually the tribes mentioned in the Bible, it was all over for them. Their lie would be out, they would be seen for what they are, impostors. Pulling off the hoax. The Zionist Jews were able to pull off their racial hoax for decades, even though historians and anthropologists, many of them Jewish, wrote books after book. In 1899, famous British historian Houston Stewart Chamberlain published The Foundations of the 19th Century, which held that the Jews were not a race, but instead were, at the time, it was not a pejorative word. Yitzhak Schipper, quoted extensively by Jacob Littman's The Economic Role of Jews in Medieval Poland, affirmed that the Khazars were the Jews. In 1867, the great Yiddish scholar Abraham Harkavi in The Jews and Languages of the Slavs spoke of the Jewish Yiddish language coming from the Khazars. Yiddish is a mixture of German and Hebrew, apparently. It was, however, a prominent Jew named Arthur Koestler, himself a Zionist Jew, who in 1976 published a book which caused such a sensation. The 13th Tribe was a literary bombshell. Koestler's accurate work was meant to be a refutation of Hitler and the Nazis, but it had incredible unintended consequences. He wrote, "The large majority of surviving Jews in the world is of Eastern European, thus perhaps mainly of Khazar origin. If so, this would mean that the Jews' ancestors came not from Canaan, but from the Caucasus, only or once believed to be the cradle of the Aryan race, and that genetically they are more closely related to the Hun, Olga and Magyar tribes than to the seed of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. The story of the Khazar Empire as it slowly emerges from the past begins to look like the most cruel hoax which history has ever perpetrated." Koestler, who thought he was doing his fellow Jews a service, was unmercifully attacked by other Zionists who felt he had let the cat out of the bag. If they come from the Khazars and are not of Israelite origin, the Jews had no ancestral claim to the land of Israel. They were not the seed of Abraham, but of King Bilal and the people of Kazaria. As Shlomo Sand, got his book outside, The History of the Jews, or something like that, history professor at the University of Tel Aviv, explains it in his outstanding 2007 book, Invention of the Jewish People. Without the Old Testament in its hand and the exile of the Jewish people in its memory, Israel would have no justification for annexing Arab Jerusalem and establishing settlements in the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, the Golan Heights, and even the Sinai Peninsula. If they were Khazars, the title, the eternal people, did not apply to them. They would be in fact another usurping ethnic conglomerate, falsely claiming to be Jews and wanting to kill to illegally possess the rightful ancestral lands of the Palestinians. Other books followed, but most notably Kevin Brooks' 1999, The Jews of Kazaria, but these many scholarly books never really became the consensus because of Zionist opposition. As Orwell once wrote, George Orwell wrote 1984, whoever controls history controls the world. DNA science introduces stark reality. Until 1968, that is, when the two British scientists, Watson and Crick, came up with DNA science. Since 1968, DNA has become the principal science used in criminology, both to convict and to exonerate. It has become so popular that DNA kits can be purchased for a couple of $100 when they're on special, so individuals can have their own blood tested to determine their heritage down to the last percentile. Yes, we've done that. I've done that personally, but be aware that sometimes they mess things up. You end up 1 minute you're of African origin, Irish, English, French, whatever, right? And then you might get another one done, and oh, you're Chinese, you're from Thailand, you know, because they do from time to time mess things up. It's been stated by people that have had those DNA tests. Depends on which one you deal with. It's possible. I think we dealt with ancestry.com .au, Australia, right? Something like that. And you have to wait like up to 8 weeks for your test results to come back. But I think it actually took less than that. Okay. Because of DNA science, historians and anthropologists have been able to find missing links and to unravel the mysteries of race and ethnology. In 2001, Dr. Ariella Oppenheim of Hebrew University, a biologist, published the first extensive study of DNA and the origin of the Jews. Her research found that virtually all the Jews came from Khazar blood. Not only that, but Oppenheim discovered that the Palestinians, the very people whom the Jews had been persecuting and ejecting from Israel's land since 1948, had more Israelite blood than did the Jews. In sum, the vast majority of the Jews were not Jews. Some of the Palestinians were. Some of the Palestinians even had a DNA chromosome which established that they were Cohens or Cohns, K-O-H-N-s. That's what Toby Singer reckons he's from. He's a descendant of the Levite priests, workers at the ancient temple and synagogues of the Jews. The definitive DNA study. Now comes the ultimate definite DNA study by Dr. Ehran Elhaik and associates at the McCusick Nathan's Institute of Genetic Medicine, Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, entitled The Missing Link of Jewish European Ancestry, Contrasting the Rhineland and the Khazarian Hypotheses, and published by the Oxford Journal on behalf of the Society for Molecular Biology and Evolution. The study confirms Oppenheim's research and the many scholarly books. Dr. Elhaik, in the prestigious Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, concluded in a report, quote, the Khazarian hypothesis suggests that Eastern European Jews descended from the Khazars, an amalgamation of Turkic clans that settled the Caucasus in the early centuries CE and converted to Judaism in the 8th century. Following the collapse of the empire, the Judeo-Khazars fled to Eastern Europe. The rise of European Jewry is therefore explained by the contribution of the Judeo-Khazars. Who can argue with DNA science? So DNA science has proven that the findings of many historians and anthropologists is correct. The Jews of Israel are not Abraham's descendants, but instead come from the subjects of King Bilal of Kazaria. Maybe we should do a history on this man. Okay. King Bilal of Kazaria. Keep that in mind. Okay. Who was this king? Have a quick look. Okay, Bilal Khazar Wikipedia. Bilal Khazar. Bilal was a Khazar king who led the conversion of the Khazars to Judaism. His name means Alp or heart, H-A-R-T, in Old Turkic. The date of his reign is unknown, as the date of the conversion is hotly disputed, though it is certain that Bilal reigned sometime between the mid-8th and the mid-9th centuries. Nor is it settled whether Bilal was the Bek of the Khagan of the Khazars. What's the Bek? A Turkic title for a chieftain, an honorific traditionally applied to people with special lineages, to the leaders of rulers of variously sized areas in the numerous Turkic kingdoms, emirates, sultanates and empires in Central Asia, Southeast Asia and the Middle East. The renowned scholar Dr. D.M. Dunlop was certain that Bilal was a Khagan or Khagan. It's the title of imperial rank in the Turkic, Mongolic and some other languages, equal to the status of emperor and someone who rules a Khaganate empire. The female equivalent is Khatun. However, more recent works, such as The Jews of Kazaria by business studies student and amateur researchers Kevin Brooke, assume that he was the Bek due to references to him leading military campaigns. Khazar tradition held that before his own conversion, Bilal was religiously unaffiliated. In his quest to discover which of the three Abrahamic religions would shape his own religious beliefs, he invited representatives from each to explain the fundamental tenets. In the end, he chose Judaism. In the Khazar correspondence, a set of documents which are alleged to date from the 950s or 960s and to be letters between Hasdai ibn Shabrut, foreign secretary to the Caliph of Cordoba, and Joseph Kagan of the Khazars. The correspondence is one of only a few. In the Khazar correspondence, King Joseph bin Aaron was king of the Khazars during the 950s and 960s. Joseph was the son of Aaron II, a Khazar ruler who defeated a Byzantine-inspired war against Kazaria on numerous fronts. Joseph's wife was the daughter of the king of the Alans, or the Alans. King Joseph traces his lineage back to Bilal. He refers to the reforming Khazar ruler Obadiah. The name of Khazar ruler of the late 8th or early 9th century is described as coming from among, quote, the sons of the sons, unquote, of Bilal, but whether this should be taken literally to mean that he was Bilal's grandson, or figuratively to apply whatever the rest of that says, a relative, whatever. Yeah. Being one of the sons of Bilal, while Brooke assumes that makes Obadiah Bilal's grandson, the Hebrew phrase is less definitive and may allude to a more remote descent. The royal descendants of Bilal are referred to by Khazar researchers as Bilanids, though their self-designation is unknown. There's more information there. Stanford Marmiots Brown, a genealogist, historian and also a convert to Judaism, would point out that it is common for Jews, whether born among Gentiles or converts, to have two names. One is of the nomenclature of the people among whom she or he lives, or was born, in a Hebrew name. Mr. Marmiots Brown's name is Jonathan Micah Hillel. Bilal is clearly a Turkic name. After conversion, he would have taken a Hebrew or Jewish name. Sabriel looks very much to be a Turkic idiomatic variation of Gabriel. So there's a little history there. Okay, back to this Texx Marrs. Okay, it's media coverage. What he had to say about that. His personal beliefs. Public behaviour. Marrs has been accused of being anti-Catholic. Would have read that. Okay. Who can argue with DNA science? So DNA science has proven that the findings of many historians and anthropologists is correct. The Jews of Israel are not Abraham's descendants, but instead come from the subjects of King Bilal or Kazaria. Now everything changes. And new DNA research confirms the Jews are not the seed of Abraham. Again, we must remind you that this video is not in any way, shape or form anti-Semitic. It's just revealing the so-called claims, the evidence made by certain supposedly professional parties. Okay, I think we might have covered this. Yeah, we covered this. Okay. So who is Ehran Elhaik? Israeli-American geneticist and bioinformatician. What's a geneticist? A biologist who studies genetics, the science of genes, heredity and variations of organisms. A geneticist can be employed as a scientist or lecturer. Geneticists may perform general research on genetic processes, etc. A bioinformatician is an interdisciplinary field that develops methods and software tools for understanding biological data, in particular when the data sets are large and complex, as an interdisciplinary field of science, bioinformatics, etc., etc. An associate professor of bioinformatics at Lund University in Sweden. His research uses computational, statistical, epidemiological and mathematical approaches to fields such as complex disorders, population genetics, personalised medicine, molecular evolution, genomics, paleogenomics and epigenetics. So he has experience in a heck of a lot of fields. Career, research, reactions. The accuracy and reliability of Elhaik's population genetic theory of the Khazars met with strong criticism from a number of other geneticists. That's usually the case, isn't it? As well as from linguists who took exception to his use of Paul Wechsler's theories of Yiddish. Paul Wechsler, an American-born Israeli linguist and professor emeritus of linguistics at Tel Aviv in Israel University. His research fields include historical linguistics, bilingualism, Slavic linguistics, Creole linguistics, Romani or Gypsy and Jewish languages. Okay, Romanian Gypsies. We did work with a native-born Romanian lady who explained that they were the original Romanian Gypsies, but apparently these Indians came into Romania and started to claim that they were the original Gypsies. She gave us a good history of what Romania, i.e. Rome, these people that deserted Rome or left Rome and lived elsewhere and called themselves Roma or Romanians. Shout out to her. At Unitech, Point Chev, Auckland, if she's still there. In particular, the validity of the proxy population used in his first Khazar paper was criticised on methodological grounds. Marcus Feldman, director of Stanford's Morrison Institute for Population and Resource Studies, has said that Elhaik is just wrong with regard to the Khazar hypothesis, where in Feldman's view he appears to be applying the statistics in a way that gives him different results from what everybody else has obtained from essentially similar data. Elhaik has continued to publish work in peer-reviewed journals supporting and developing his research on questions regarding the ancestry of Jewish populations. Elhaik's position is that the principal components analysis employed to identify population structures and the ancestry has serious flaws that generate erroneous results. In a 2015 overview of the issue of attempts to derive an inclusive genetic profile of all Jews, Raphael Falk, who is German-born Israeli geneticist and historian of science. He was Professor Emeritus of Genetics at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem in Israel. His early research was on the genetics of Drosophila, and from 1983 he was active in researching. Okay, so he's touching on Elhaik's contribution to the argument in 2013. The findings support the hypothesis that posits that European Jews are comprised of Caucasus, European and Middle Eastern ancestries, and portrays the European Jewish genome as a mosaic of Caucasus, European and Semitic ancestries, thereby consolidating previous contradictory reports of Jewish ancestry. Falk then noted the follow-up paper by Bihar challenging Elhaik's results, argued that the southern Caucasus populations sampled by Elhaik were related to countries further south. The problem, he concluded, was that the quote, risk of circularity of the argument is exposed. Geneticists determine the genotypic details of socio-ethnologists' classifications, whereas socio-demographers rely on geneticists' findings to bolster the classifications. Make of that what you will. Okay, if you can get your head around that and have a full understanding of what that's detailing, then explain it to us in the comment section, and we'll get back to you on that as soon as possible. Okay, and here is a free ebook you can get from Mr. Google, The Greatest Lie on Earth, Proof That Our World is Not a Moving Globe, by Edward Hendry. Proof That Our World is Not a Moving Globe, by Edward Hendry. Say among the heathen that the Lord reigneth, the word also shall be established, that it shall not be moved. He shall judge the people righteously. Psalms 96:10. So what does that mean? Right. Go amongst the heathen or the non-believers and tell them that the Lord rules. The world also shall be established, that it shall not be moved from its position, right? From where it is in the universe. He shall judge the people righteously, Psalms 96:10. Does that mean it won't be thrown off its axis, or that it actually doesn't spin? Keep that which is committed to thy trust, avoiding profane and vain babblings and oppositions of science falsely so called, which some professing have erred concerning the faith. Grace be with thee. Amen. 1 Timothy 6:20-21. Here's the King James Version. We'll have a look at that.